There's a question that haunts anyone who studies the Holocaust. A question so disturbing that most people can't even bring themselves to ask it out loud. Why did the Nazis take the hair of their victims in the concentration camps? It's a dreadful, horrible question to ask, yet cold, cruel logic provides the answer. What I'm about to tell you represents one of the most chilling examples of industrial-scale dehumanization in human history. This isn't just a story about the Holocaust. It's a story about how evil can be systematic, efficient, and terrifyingly practical. Let me tell you exactly what happened, because this is something the world must never forget. When Allied forces liberated the concentration camps at the end of World War II, they discovered something that would haunt them forever. Mountains of personal belongings, piles of shoes reaching to the ceiling, thousands of suitcases with names written on them, rooms filled with eyeglasses, prosthetic limbs, children's toys. But among all these horrifying discoveries, there was something particularly disturbing. Enormous bales of human hair. Not just a little bit. We're talking about literally tons of human hair, neatly packed, labeled, and ready for shipment. At Auschwitz alone, Soviet soldiers found over 7 tons of human hair when they liberated the camp in January 1945. 7 tons. Think about that for a moment. How many people does it take to produce 7 tons of hair? And more importantly, why would anyone collect it? The answer reveals something about the Nazi regime that goes beyond ordinary evil. It shows a level of calculated efficiency, a coldness, a complete erasure of humanity that's almost impossible to comprehend. The Nazis weren't just killing people, they were recycling them. They were extracting every possible resource from their victims' bodies, right down to the last strand of hair. This wasn't random cruelty. This wasn't chaos. This was organized, systematic, industrial-scale exploitation of human remains. And it was all part of the plan. Let me walk you through how this actually worked, because understanding the process is crucial to understanding the depths of Nazi depravity. When prisoners arrived at concentration camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, or Majdanek, they went through what the Nazis called selection. The infamous moment when an SS officer, often a doctor, would decide with a simple gesture who would live and who would die. Those selected for immediate death, usually the elderly, the sick, children, and mothers with young children, were told they were going to shower. They were told to remember where they left their belongings, so they could find them afterward. It was all a lie. They were being led to gas chambers, disguised as shower rooms. But before they entered those chambers, there was a procedure. Women and girls had their hair cut off. Right there, before they were murdered. The Nazis had special prisoners, usually other inmates, whose job was to cut hair as quickly as possible. These prisoner barbers worked under unimaginable psychological torture, knowing exactly what was about to happen to the people whose hair they were cutting. Imagine that. Imagine being forced to cut the hair of women and children who were about to be killed. Imagine looking into their confused, frightened faces. Imagine the weight of that knowledge. Many of these prisoner barbers later testified that this was one of the most traumatic aspects of their entire camp experience. And these were people who had survived years in concentration camps. After the victims were murdered in the gas chambers, their bodies were searched for any remaining valuables. Gold teeth were extracted. Any hidden jewelry was found, and then the bodies were burned in crematoria. But the hair had already been collected before death. It was kept separate, treated as valuable material. Now here's where it gets even more disturbing. The hair wasn't just taken from those who were immediately murdered. Prisoners who were selected for forced labor also had their heads shaved upon arrival. This served multiple purposes. It was part of the dehumanization process, stripping away individual identity and dignity. It was supposedly for hygiene, though the camps themselves were cesspools of disease due to Nazi neglect. But it also served an economic purpose. Every bit of hair was collected and saved. The collected hair went through a specific process. It was first washed to remove any dirt, blood, or lice. Then it was disinfected, usually with chemical treatments to kill any remaining parasites or bacteria. After that, it was sorted by length and quality. The Nazis were meticulous about this. They had standards for hair just like they had standards for everything else in their grotesque system. Once sorted and processed, the hair was packed extremely tightly into large bales. These weren't small packages. These were massive bundles, compressed as much as possible to maximize the amount that could be transported. The bales were heavy, dense, and ready for shipment. Where did these bales go? They were sent to German companies, private businesses that had contracts with the SS to receive and process these materials. These weren't obscure underground operations. These were legitimate German firms, companies with addresses and employees and tax records. They knew exactly what they were receiving. They knew the hair came from concentration camps. They knew the implications. But they participated anyway because there was profit to be made. The German economy during the war was desperate for materials. Every resource was needed for the war effort, and human hair, as grotesque as it sounds, was a useful resource. So, what exactly was the hair used for? The primary use was in the manufacture of industrial felt. Now, if you're not familiar with felt, let me explain. Felt is a type of textile material made by matting, condensing, and pressing fibers together. It's thick, it's durable, it's warm, and it has excellent insulating properties. Human hair, it turns out, makes very good felt. It has the right texture, the right properties. In a twisted irony, the same hair that once adorned living human beings was transformed into a commodity to support the very regime that murdered them. This industrial felt, made from human hair, was used extensively by the German military. They made socks from it. Warm, thick socks for soldiers stationed on the brutal Eastern Front, where temperatures could drop to deadly levels. German soldiers fighting in Russia during winter wore socks that might have been made from the hair of the very people they were helping to exterminate. They made mittens, gloves, linings for boots, anything that needed to keep soldiers warm in freezing conditions. The hair of murdered Jews, Roma, Poles, and other victims literally clothed the German army. But it didn't stop there. The felt was also used for industrial purposes. They used it in padding and insulation. They stuffed mattresses with it. They used it as soundproofing material, and perhaps most chillingly, they used it in the construction and maintenance of U-boats, German submarines. The insulation in submarines that prowled the Atlantic, hunting Allied ships, may have contained felt made from human hair. Think about that. The victims of the Holocaust were converted into materials that helped the German war machine continue fighting. Their bodies became part of the very system that destroyed them. This represents the ultimate form of disrespect, the absolute nadir of human degradation. The Nazis didn't just murder their victims. They didn't just steal their property and their dignity. They literally recycled their bodies into useful materials. They treated human beings as nothing more than raw resources to be exploited. A person wasn't a person to them. A person was a collection of potentially useful materials. Hair for felt, gold teeth for the treasury, fat from bodies for soap production, though this was less common than often believed. Bones for fertilizer. Every single part of a human being was evaluated for its potential economic value. The coldness of this logic is almost impossible to comprehend. Imagine the mindset required to implement such a system. Imagine the meetings where Nazi officials discussed the most efficient ways to extract resources from the people they were murdering. Imagine the paperwork, the contracts with private companies, the invoices for tons of human hair. This wasn't the work of madmen acting in chaos. This was bureaucratic, organized, systematic exploitation. It was evil wearing a suit and tie, evil with filing cabinets and shipping manifests, When the camps were liberated and the world discovered these horrors, the evidence was undeniable. The bales of hair found at Auschwitz were among the most powerful pieces of evidence presented at the Nuremberg trials. They proved beyond any doubt that the Holocaust wasn't just about killing. It was about industrial-scale dehumanization and exploitation. The hair became evidence of crimes against humanity. It became proof of the systematic nature of Nazi atrocities. Today, some of that hair is preserved in Holocaust museums around the world. Behind glass, carefully maintained, it serves as a testament to what happened. Visitors to Auschwitz can see displays of this hair, and it remains one of the most emotionally overwhelming exhibits in the entire museum. But here's something that often gets overlooked in discussions about the Holocaust. The companies that received and processed this human hair, what happened to them? The truth is, most of them faced little to no consequences after the war. Some company owners claim they didn't know the hair came from murdered victims, that they thought it was just regular industrial material. This claim is almost impossible to believe. The quantities alone should have raised questions. The fact that it came from concentration camps was hardly a secret. But in the chaotic aftermath of World War II, with so much destruction and so many crimes to prosecute, many of these companies simply continued operating. Some of them exist to this day, though obviously no longer using human hair. The individuals who profited from this trade mostly escaped justice. This raises uncomfortable questions about complicity and responsibility. The guards who cut the hair were obviously guilty. The SS officers who organized the collection were guilty. But what about the truck drivers who transported the bales? What about the factory workers who processed the hair into felt? What about the accountants who handled the financial transactions? What about the soldiers who wore the socks made from human hair? Where does guilt begin and end in a system of evil this comprehensive? These are questions that scholars and philosophers continue to debate today. The Nazi collection of hair also reveals something crucial about the nature of genocide. It's not just about hatred, though hatred is certainly part of it. It's also about dehumanization taken to its logical extreme. When you can look at a human being and see only raw materials, when you can systematically organize the collection and processing of human body parts as if they were industrial commodities, you've crossed a line that should be impossible to cross. Yet the Nazis crossed it, and they did so with efficiency and organization that would be impressive if it weren't so horrifying. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of this story is what it meant for the victims themselves. Imagine being a woman standing in line, knowing or suspecting that you're about to die, and someone cuts off your hair. That hair might have been something you were proud of. Maybe you used to style it carefully. Maybe your children loved to play with it. Maybe your partner used to compliment it. And now it's being cut off not for any medical reason, not as punishment, but simply because it has economic value to your murderers. The indignity of it, the absolute dehumanization, is almost unbearable to contemplate. You're not even allowed to die with your dignity intact. Even in your final moments, you're being exploited. The survivors who witnessed these haircutting operations carried the trauma with them for the rest of their lives. Many testified about it in trials and interviews. They described the sounds, the sight of piles of hair growing larger throughout the day. They described the faces of the women and girls having their hair cut. They described their own feelings of helplessness and horror. Some survivors said that decades later, they still couldn't bear to see hair being cut. The trauma was that deep, that permanent. What makes this even more disturbing is that it was all documented. The Nazis kept records of everything. They had paperwork for the shipments of hair. They had contracts with the companies. They had invoices and receipts. This wasn't a secret operation. It was part of the official system. In their twisted worldview, there was nothing wrong with it. They were simply being efficient, making use of available resources. They genuinely didn't see their victims as human beings deserving of respect or dignity. This is what makes the Holocaust uniquely terrifying among genocides. It wasn't just mass murder, it was industrial-scale processing of human beings, as if they were nothing more than livestock or raw materials. The hair collected from concentration camps also serves as a reminder of the individual lives that were destroyed. Each strand of hair came from a real person, with a name, a family, hopes, dreams, and a future that was stolen from them. When you look at those bales of hair in museums today, you're not looking at abstract historical artifacts. You're looking at the physical remains of human beings who were murdered for no reason other than who they were. That hair once grew on the head of a child playing with friends. It once belonged to a mother worried about her family. It once adorned a young woman excited about her future. And then that future was taken away. And even their hair was stolen and turned into a commodity. There's a reason why the image of these bales of hair has become one of the most iconic and disturbing symbols of the Holocaust. It represents everything that the Nazi regime stood for in one horrifying package. The systematic dehumanization, the cold efficiency, the complete moral bankruptcy, the reduction of human beings to economic units, the exploitation of victims even in death. All of it is encapsulated in those compressed bales of human hair, sitting in warehouses and being shipped to factories. Today, when we ask why the Nazis took the hair of their victims, the answer forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about human nature. Under certain conditions, with certain ideologies, ordinary people can participate in extraordinary evil. The person cutting hair in the camp was following orders. The truck driver transporting bales was just doing his job. The factory worker processing the felt was just trying to earn a living. The soldier wearing the socks didn't ask where they came from. But collectively, all of these individual actions created a system of horror that turned human beings into industrial materials. This is why we must remember, not just to honor the victims, though that's certainly important, but also to remind ourselves how easily ordinary economic and industrial processes can be corrupted into instruments of evil. The hair of Holocaust victims stands as a permanent testament to what humans are capable of when we lose our moral compass, when we prioritize efficiency over ethics, when we see other people as less than human. It reminds us that evil isn't always dramatic or theatrical. Sometimes it's bureaucratic. Sometimes it's efficient. Sometimes it wears a business suit and signs contracts and ships products. And that kind of evil, the systematic, organized, industrial kind, might be the most dangerous of all, because it can so easily be rationalized, normalized, and justified by those participating in it. This is why the question, why did the Nazis take the hair of their victims, is so important. Because the answer reveals not just historical facts about World War II, but fundamental truths about human nature, about systems of oppression, about how genocide functions, and about why we must remain vigilant against the dehumanization of any group of people. The moment we start seeing human beings as resources to be exploited rather than individuals deserving of dignity and respect, we've started down the same path that led to those bales of hair in Auschwitz. The victims of the Holocaust cannot speak for themselves anymore, but their hair remains. It speaks for them. It tells their story. It demands that we remember, that we learn, and that we never, ever allow such systematic dehumanization to happen again.